Hello and welcome to today's HR Daily Advisor webcast. We want to thank you all for joining us for today's program. The challenge ahead for recruiting is clear, but which path will you choose? Sponsored by Jobvite. My name is Sarah from the HR Daily Advisor, and I'm here to go over a few housekeeping items before I pass the presentation over to our moderator and speaker. So just a few notes. The console that you're looking at right now offers multiple application widgets that you can use throughout the presentation. You can resize any of these widgets or move them around and minimize them as you wish. There is a media player button where you can play with the volume of today's presentation. Please take note that there is no dial-in number for today's event. The audio will be streaming directly through your computer speakers. If you have any technical difficulties, please click on the Help widget. It has a question mark icon and covers common technical errors. If your technical issue does not resolve, please enter a question into the Q&A widget and our team will gladly assist you. All right, now, please join me in welcoming our special guest, Angela Lee, Senior Marketing Program Manager at Jobvite, to the floor for a special announcement and introduction for today's speaker. Angela, so great to have you here. I'm going to give the presentation to you.
Great. Thank you, Sarah. Hi, everyone. My name is Angela Lee, and I'm on the marketing team here at Jobvite. As background, Jobvite enables leading companies to recruit, source, and onboard all within a single platform. We have over 10 years of experience focused solely on recruitment and a recruiting strategy that emphasizes putting candidates at the center of recruiting. Jobvite has helped companies fill over 1 million jobs to date. Now on to the webinar. I'm so excited to introduce our speaker, Jennifer McClure, CEO of Unbridled Talent. Jennifer is recognized as an influencer and expert on the future of work, innovative people strategies, and strategic leadership. She is a top-rated keynote speaker and trainer who has delivered high-impact programs to over 50,000 people in 9 countries and on 4 continents. Jennifer has coached and mentored multiple leaders and executives in small, medium, and Fortune 100 companies and understands what it takes to succeed in today's rapidly changing world. Jennifer?
Well, welcome everyone to the webinar. I hope you're having a great day wherever you're located in the world and whatever time zone that you're in. But hopefully for the next 45 minutes or so, we can all have come together and agree on the fact that if you are in human resources, talent acquisition, recruiting, working in any capacity where you are in an organization that needs to hire and retain people, you are experiencing some challenges in today's world. And so I want to take a little bit of time to share with you not only some of those challenges that I'm sure you're familiar with, but also to maybe get you to think a little bit differently about how you can approach solving some of those challenges. So when I say that the challenge ahead is clear, we know there are talent shortages and skills gaps and location issues and changing world of work and globalization and just any number of issues that are causing some stress on us in the talent acquisition professions. But there are some solutions out there that are working for companies. And again, I want to share some of those with you and give you some options. So it's not going to be so much of like, do this, this, and this, but it's going to be more about maybe you could think differently about some of these challenges and how you could approach them. And I know that many of you are probably sitting in your desks listening to this webinar, and either this is what your office looks like or this is what it feels like. Again, it can be very overwhelming in the sense that, you know, unemployment in the U.S. at least is at the lowest level recorded in many years, if not ever. I think the last numbers I saw were 3.9%. But if you live in some areas like North Dakota or South Dakota or some of the areas where maybe there are some specific industries that are hitting very hard or the population growth is not what it needs to be in order to sustain, or even in countries like Japan or some in Brazil, etc., there are real challenges. You may not have the talent in your area that you need to fill openings, and so we continue to hear about job creation and unemployment and those types of things, but you might be sitting on some jobs that have been open for, 6 months or more, or sometimes even longer than that. And so it's really can be frustrating, and I feel your pain because I worked as an HR practitioner and recruiting practitioner for almost 20 years in the corporate world, and then spent some time as an executive recruiter as well. So I know some of the challenges that you face and how it can feel overwhelming. And sometimes we attend seminars or we go to conferences or events and we're looking for how can we improve what we're doing and how can we do what we do better in order to have better results. And absolutely, we all should be looking at things that way. But what I want you to think about is this kind of great quote from Sally Hogshead, who's an author of a book called How to Fascinate. And she talks about it from both a brand marketing perspective, and then her second book is more on the personal branding perspective. But I love the way she frames this up, is that different is better than better. So when you're thinking about the challenges that you face and how you can improve your processes, improve your actions, in many ways, so are all your competitors. So is everybody else. We're all looking for how we can get better every day. But the companies out there that are really winning, the companies that are kind of breaking through the noise and attracting people to their jobs or having success and getting the right people on board, I think are the companies who are doing a great job at really differentiating themselves. They might even still be using some old techniques to go about how they attract and recruit talent, but they're differentiating themselves, or they're differentiating them jobs, or in some way helping themselves to really stand out in the noise. So as you kind of like listen to some of the things that I'm sharing with you today, or even think about your own recruiting practices and talent acquisition practices in your organization, how can you think, are we doing the same things that everyone else is doing? Are we looking at what others are doing and copying what they're doing? And again, that is certainly a strategy, I think, for all of us in some cases. I tell everyone at, presentations that I do, especially, and I will share in this, some examples from like a Google or a Facebook or some companies where maybe you're working in an organization that has 100 employees and you hear me share an example from Google and you're like, well, they're Google. We can't match their budget or their reach or their brand. But I always encourage people to take some learnings from what companies that are bigger or maybe have more resources have done, because a lot of what they learn can still apply to you even if you're small. But again, also, can you look at what they're doing and think, well, how could we put our own twist on this and make what we do different, not just better? So to kind of frame up how I approach this presentation, I started with The Matrix. Now, I'm a big Keanu Reeves fan, so love me or hate me for that. So I've probably seen most every movie Keanu's made, for better or for worse. And one of my favorites, and probably one of most people's favorites, is The Matrix. And if you've seen The Matrix, or even if you haven't seen it or you heard it, you know one of the kind of iconical things about the Matrix movie is the fact that Neo has to make a choice between the red pill and the blue pill. And the red pill is the truth, the reality, the unknown. The blue pill is you pretty much just stay the same and you already know what's going to happen and life just continues as is. So whether or not you choose the red pill or blue pill, it's kind of positioned in the movie by Morpheus that it's not really about a right choice or a wrong choice. It's whether or not you want to step into the unknown and see what you can find out and achieve. And so I'm going to present you in this webinar that we're doing today with some red pill, blue pill options. Remembering, again, I'm not necessarily saying one is better than the other, but there are almost always two choices in how you approach anything, and certainly in terms of how you approach recruiting practices. So we're following that matrix red pill, blue pill kind of approach in this webinar today. And I'm kind of coming at you, as I said, as Morpheus did in the movie. All I'm offering is the truth, nothing more. You can make your choices about what's best for your organization, and sometimes that's the blue pill approach, which are going to be best practices. And then sometimes it's the red pill approach, which might be what's new and next and either hasn't been done before or maybe is being done by only a few companies out there really trying to work on that differentiation instead of small improvements. So which choices you make, again, up to you, but hopefully I'll present you with some choices and you can think a little bit differently. So best practices, you'll see this slide throughout Again, it's the blue pill, and I just noticed a few minutes ago as we were kind of waiting for the webinar to start, I used custom fonts in this presentation and they didn't translate here. So I do know how to spell best practices. The E and the S is supposed to go after the C, but it looks like this slide is probably going to be only one of the ones that's going to be a little bit off on the formatting, but you can stick with me here. So again, best practices aren't bad. You know, from my almost 30 years or more out there working both in the corporate world and now out on my own, I'm always searching for best practices and what companies are doing that is working. But a friend of mine said once, and it kind of stuck with me, you know, best practices basically means if you're using best practices and other people are using best practices, that's pretty much average. You know, that's what everyone else is doing. And so then it doesn't really become a best practice once everyone else is doing. It's more of a standard practice. And again, we need those and have many of those in our work. But if you're trying to raise above the noise again, if you're trying to get noticed in a busy world, if you're trying to attract and recruit in a really tough market, then best practices may not always get you the results that you're looking for. So again, best practices not being bad, blue pill, red pill, not one choice or the other, but best practices often are tried and true. They're predictable because enough companies or people or individuals are doing them now that they've been, you know, kind of lauded as best practices because they work. And in some sense, everybody's doing it or everybody's eventually going to be doing it. And so you can look back over the history of talent acquisition, and back in the day, you know, best practices might have been advertising in the newspaper and waiting for those to be dropped in the driveways on Sunday morning and people applying to your jobs via mail. And then it became a best practice to include your fax number so that people could send in those, you know, for those of you that are old enough to remember the old scrolly rolled up fax paper that was yellow and you had to, you know, catch it before it rolled away. And then best practices at some point became posting jobs online, and now best practices are any number and all kinds of things, some of which we'll chat about. But, you know, best practices continue to evolve, and again, they're not bad, and they certainly do work. I'm also going to get you to hopefully think about what are some next practices. So maybe not everyone is doing it, or a lot of companies or organizations don't think that the next practices are for them. So the next practices are often those things that maybe only a few are trying, or they're relatively new. And in a lot of cases, not everyone's doing it because it's risky. You know, you could go out and you could try something, you could try to be funny, you could try to be creative, and it could bomb, it could, you know, be perceived differently. I mean, how many examples have we seen of brands who, you know, tried to change their marketing and it's fallen flat? I think a good recent example, and I don't, you know, we don't necessarily know how this is going to turn out, but again, if you're in the U.S. and you're familiar with International House of Pancakes, for a very long time they were known as International House of Pancakes, and you knew where it was, and they had the big kind of Swedish-looking red roof or pitched roofs, and then they said, no, that's not cool enough. We need to be IHOP, and they changed all their branding and their signage and the look of their stores, and they became IHOP. And then sometime last month, they started announcing a change, and they said, we're going to be IHOB. I think that's hilarious. I don't know that it resonates with me, but I also have a friend who's a marketing expert who says it's brilliant and genius. So now they're the International House of Burgers. That's the next practice, you know, in the sense that they're trying to say, we know that there's this younger generation out there, or maybe not everybody likes pancakes, but we have a lot of things. So we want to see if we can broaden our appeal by being the International House of Burgers. Who knows? Time will tell as whether or not that's the new Coke of our generation, but we'll see, because there's some risks involved with that, but there's also potential reward, a broader market for them, et cetera. So those are kind of things, you know, again, people who are trying something different, maybe it doesn't resonate with everyone, and some organizations, and I've worked for organizations and leaders before who maybe say, you know, we don't want to be out there on the forefront. We want to see, let other people go ahead and try something, and then once it becomes an established best practice, then we'll get on board. Well, that goes back to, you know, different is better than better. Better might keep you as a going concern, but in order to really kind of accelerate your growth or to attract talent when everybody else is also looking for the same talent, you might have to think about, are there some things that we can do that will make us unique in the market? So with each of these, I want to try to share with you some things to think about. And when you think about next practices, and it's almost, I guess, kind of reached the stage where thinking about mobile and how that fits into your job search strategy and your job posting strategy, it's almost probably reached that, best practice or standard practice approach. But really, there are still so many companies out there that either aren't considering the mobile experience for their jobs online and how they are posted and received, and then maybe they don't even have the opportunity for people to be able to search or apply to their jobs on a mobile device. And as I said, it's waning in terms of next practices, because if you look at these stats from Indeed, and these are some recent stats from Indeed, we tend to think about, those millennials, which they're not really kids anymore. They're in their mid-20s, late 30s, but then there's the generation after them. You're like, those are the only people that want to think about mobile search or mobile apply, and that's just not true. This data from Indeed shows that it's, predominantly a mobile search strategy in terms of job search for both millennials and Gen Xers, and then even for the baby boomers, assuming that, more than 50% of them are searching for jobs on their mobile device and then even applying. So this is a practice that if it's not part of your recruiting strategy today, how your jobs show up in terms of mobile job search, and then thinking about, again, mobile apply for your jobs, that's something that you're already behind if you're not considering that. And so it's definitely something that you should be working with your partners and that you use, your vendors, et cetera, to make sure that your jobs are able to be searched on mobile. And then really the opportunity for people to do some sort of application through a mobile device, where maybe then they get into a queue to either fill out a more lengthy application or have a job screen through a phone interview, et cetera. Those are things that if you're not using those, you are absolutely losing candidates today, because many of them are not using the desktop experience at all in terms of their job search, and or they think of, maybe they're looking for a job while they're sitting at a restaurant by themselves eating a meal. They find one that they like, but they can't apply online, and either they forget or they just don't think, they just kind of dismiss you because they're not going to think to go back to their desktop or their laptop and apply at a later date. So mobile and mobile strategy in general is definitely something that should be on the forefront and really should be not just the next practice, but your practice. And then here are just, again, one example of social media. And almost like mobile, just a couple of years ago, not everybody was thinking about mobile for their job search strategies. And certainly not everybody was thinking that many people were thinking about social media in terms of how people either posted or search for jobs. And so we had a time where recruiters were just like tweeting out links to job posts and sharing them on their LinkedIn page. And obviously that's evolved, but there are some tools like, the cooler things these days, more like Instagram or Snapchat or even Pinterest or some of these other places where people are hanging out online, where a lot of companies are like, well, that's just, where people post pictures of selfies, et cetera. But there are some companies who are thinking about, well, if that's where the eyeballs are out there, in terms of how people are spending their time, we're all addicted to our mobile devices. And when we're on our mobile devices, how are we using that? It's to play around on social networks, and Instagram is certainly one of the most popular social networks today, and a place where people not only visit, but they hang out and stay. I mean, I can scroll through my Instagram feed for hours before I realize, all that time I've just lost. And so here's a company like GE that's saying, well, if people are using Instagram, how can we take advantage of some of those eyeballs? Think about how the platform is used. So it's certainly not going to be, here's a picture of a job posting on our website, but how can we get people interested in careers at General Electric or the work that we do? And so this is an example that I just pulled a screenshot of, from a while ago, where, I don't know, that's at least interesting enough, that picture, where I'd probably notice it in my feed. And then they've got information about some of the jobs and careers that they have, and they're using the hashtag lingo. So you can see, and you probably, if you're on Instagram, you maybe follow some companies. If you don't, and you're again in talent acquisition or something where you're searching for talent, human resources, recruiting, et cetera, Maybe you should follow a few companies that are doing some really innovative and creative things out there. Now, does that mean that if you're, again, a company of 100, that you need to go out and create an Instagram account for your company, and who's going to manage it and who's going to post it and who has to approve it? Those are all things to think about. It may be worth it. You know, again, if you're recruiting, I have many CEOs, founders that I know that have relatively small companies, but they're trying to recruit and attract the same software developers or the same engineers that big companies are recruiting for, like a GE or, you know, a Google or a Facebook. So they are going to have to do something to stand out. So maybe it's worth their time to create a cool, fun Instagram account that we think about how that fits into our overall strategy, not just maybe for jobs, but for branding our company in general. And while it might sound like, oh, a small company, I don't have, you know, there's not any benefit to me doing that. Again, how can you stand out? There are companies out there all over the internet that are doing really cool and fun things that their brands are getting noticed because of how they're handling social media. An example that comes to mind is moon pie. I'm from the South in the United States, and so I grew up with moon pies, which, if you're not familiar with it, it's 2 cookies that are covered in chocolate with a marshmallow cream center. So not really, you know, an innovative snack, but it's kind of been around forever, and again, it was primarily popular in the South. Well, now moon pie is on Twitter. So if you've ever been on Twitter and you just search for moon pie is on Twitter, and they have a very snarky Twitter account. They pick battles, like with the IHOP thing. They made fun of IHOP for their, you know, going towards burgers, because they've always been, you know, I think IHOP said they wanted to own circular foods. Again, somebody's trying to be creative. And moon pie was like, okay, yeah, whatever. But more and more, like, people who have huge followings on Twitter are retweeting and resharing some of the cool and funny tweets from moon pie, because of how they've kind of approached their voice on social media. So my guess is that now moon pie, not just because of their social media strategy, but also a big piece of that, is getting recognized by more than people just in the southern United States, and they're wondering, where can I get me some moon pies? So think about that example. Where can I get me some software engineers or some engineering talent? Maybe it's doing something creative on something like Instagram or even Snapchat. Now, this is an example from a friend of mine, Nando Rodriguez, who at the time was the employment branding manager at a company called Horizon Media in New York City. And they were actually trying to recruit some very high-level talent for their advertising and marketing agency. And Nando shared this story on Facebook. He's my Facebook friend, and I just thought this was a great example of how really doing something different on a platform that most people say, Snapchat? I mean, I don't even understand Snapchat myself, and I'm pretty active on social media, but I still, you know, it's not really my people. It's a younger demographic on Snapchat for the most part, although I know plenty of people my age that are using it. But the Horizon Media team actually did some things like create a cool Snapchat filter for people who might be snapping around their location. And Nando shared this story about how they were actually able to recruit someone through their activity on Snapchat, and it was a person that they had reached out to through traditional methods in a number of ways and had gotten no response. So this might be a one-off story, but if they made a critical hire from trying something innovative and different with very little investment on a platform, again, where this is where the eyeballs are, that to me is kind of a next practice. And Horizon Media is not a huge company with big budgets. So that was a way that they were able to get noticed by a candidate who was already ignoring them, and in a very busy market and in a very busy world. So how can you create some success stories? Here's another crazy idea that was done by, again, a very established company called L'Oreal, where a couple years ago, they created a campaign where people all over the world were asked to share what their dream was in a tweet or a social media post using only emojis. Now, some of the responses you can Google, like L'Oreal dream job emoji, and see some of the tweets that were shared. I mean, people got really creative at the time. You could only use 140 characters on Twitter, but they used 140 emojis to explain their job, and then to read the interpretation of that was interesting. But then, you know, carrying that further, L'Oreal got a lot of attention from just doing something creative. You know, I don't know that anybody set out and said, what's the business objective of this and how is this going to, but it got them noticed. It got your jobs in front of people. It got people having fun that maybe weren't even going to consider L'Oreal or careers at L'Oreal, but because they were sharing their dream job in emojis, it brought attention to the job openings that L'Oreal had. And then they actually kind of analyzed all of those tweets, and they came up with the most popular emojis by region, which I thought was pretty interesting. So if you look at like the Americas region there, it's like maybe that means, so the airplane might mean travel. People want to love their jobs. They want to have ideas from the light bulb. They want to learn from the book. They want to work, you know, digitally or remotely. I don't know. That's how I interpret those emojis. And it doesn't really matter. Like I said, the fact that this got them noticed, the fact that this got them to be seen as different, better, rather than just doing recruiting better, it was a way for them to open up their opportunities to people that maybe would not have noticed L'Oreal before. So those are some ways, again, to just think about when we think about next practices. They're often the crazy ideas that you just try. Maybe you just pilot something. You just try it on a small scale. You see if it makes any ripples in your pond in a small pond. And then if that's something that if you have a larger or broader or global recruiting strategy, maybe you can roll it out over time. But just trying crazy, unique things sometimes is a way to get noticed in a very noisy world. So certainly if you're in talent acquisition, you know, you're thinking about, oh, how do we find people for our jobs? Because that's the way, you know, at least I've always heard in terms of best practices is we have a job opening. So we have recruiters, we sometimes outsource to recruiters. We have a whole team of people who their job is to go out and find the people for our job openings. And that's a traditional, I guess, best practice in that regard. What I want you to think about, though, is maybe that red pill approach, that kind of next practice strategies is not that we're finding people for jobs, but that we're matching people with the work. So we have a piece of work in our organization that requires certain skill sets. So instead of maybe thinking about it as a whole person that we need to hire, what are the skills that we need to bring to the work in our organization, and how can we go out and match those skill sets to the work? So sometimes that means, in the past, again, it was very much a traditional practice that for many years you had jobs that were located in a certain place geographically. It might be Omaha, Nebraska, it might be San Francisco, it might be Austin, Texas, and your job as a recruiter was to find the talent, hopefully locally, so you didn't have to relocate them. But if not, then maybe you expanded your search and you had to try to find not only the people that had the skill set, but people who are willing to relocate to your location. Well, we all know probably more and more relocation is a challenge for a lot of people, and the fact that skill sets aren't necessarily located in our local area is part of the challenge. So by analyzing the data, and there are a number of tools out there that you can use to do this. LinkedIn has some tools where you can analyze, again, in this example, if we're looking for, you know, a certain type of occupation, this is MZ data, which EMSI is a division of Career Builder, where they do basically a lot of analysis and data analysis. And so if I have a specific job, I can use a tool like LinkedIn, or I can use a tool that maybe MZ has, or maybe one of the vendors that I'm working with has some sort of data analytics tool where, based off of, in MZ's case, they look at Bureau of Labor Statistics data. In LinkedIn's case, obviously, they're looking at LinkedIn data. Where are the skill sets actually located? And in this example, you can see that if this company is looking for this particular type of job, the majority of people with those skills are located in California and Texas. Well, if I'm in Bozeman, Montana, and I need people with those skill sets, I know right away I've got a challenge. Because if somebody's living in Austin, Texas, and it's a software developer position, for example, I might not be able to convince them to relocate to Bozeman, Montana, as cool as Bozeman, Montana is. So I've got some choices to make. I'm going to spend a lot of time trying to convince someone, first of all, to find someone with those skills, second of all, to convince someone to try to relocate to my area, or I can think about, I just need to find people with those skills, and we need to structure the work in the way that we can access those skills wherever people are located in the world. So it's much less about bringing people to our jobs in today's world than it is about thinking about going out and acquiring the skills, and then sometimes rethinking our work in the workplace to how we can match those skills. But I think starting with the data and finding tools that you can use to say, where is the talent located, so that we know what challenges this presents to us. Going back to some of the creative recruiting examples that I mentioned earlier, again, let's say you're in Bozeman, Montana. You see software developers are located in Austin, Texas, and in San Francisco, California. Well, how are you even going to get people to notice your jobs? So that's where, again, if I'm going to do something creative and I'm going to start putting it out in front of people, it doesn't really benefit me to put it out to people in Fargo, North Dakota, but I might really want to target the Austin area or the San Francisco area with my recruiting activities and efforts. So data is critical to how you approach your jobs today, and it's going to help you think about those next practices. Another thing to think about when you're thinking about, again, how do we rethink the job search, the job application, the position hiring process of the future with the knowns that we have: talent shortages, skills gaps, location, relocation issues, demographic changes. And I think one of the most critical things you can do is to rethink the types of people that you hire for positions. We all know it's much more difficult today to hire someone. If we, used to in the past, we could run a job advertisement for 10 years of experience, a 4-year degree in accounting, and experience working in a particular industry, and you could get several candidates to choose from that. More and more people don't either have the years of experience, degrees are getting less and less popular, or they're people getting degrees that are very general and they're not as specific as maybe we would like for them to be. So to rethink the future of hiring, I think it's critical for us to think about hiring people who have the right attitude and aptitude, that then we train them on the skills that we need. And I love the study that was done by IBM where they surveyed global CEOs and they asked them, what are the critical traits of a successful employee? So just a general question, critical traits of a successful employee. And if you look at the results here, I don't see anything like years of experience in the industry or the ability to use Microsoft Office or to work as a team, which is what you see on a lot of job descriptions, unfortunately. What they said were the things that they identify in successful employees are the fact that they're collaborative, communicative, creative, flexible were the top kind of things that they mentioned. That's what we need to be thinking about in terms of hiring talent, because more and more today, again, we're not going to be able to go out and hire the exact fit. So the next practice is really thinking about how do we hire people who have the ability to learn? Because all of us, our skills are becoming more and more irrelevant every day, and we have to keep acquiring new skills in order to remain relevant. So if whether you're a baby boomer or you're a millennial, the things that you know today, 5 years from now, jobs will be different in a lot of ways. We'll be using different technology. It'll be a different approach. So if we're all going to need to be lifelong learners, taking a focus in your hiring strategy to hiring people who are great at learning and have the ability to adapt and thrive and change, that's what we need to think about, which means we have to think about our job ads that we put out there and making sure that we are opening up our funnel to people that we can train, in addition to, hopefully that unicorn that maybe has the exact skills. But it's much more about how can we access talent that we can grow and build in the future. And then in our organizations, how do we think about our interview process? How do you interview to find out if someone is collaborative or communicative versus, and again, the E is gone off of that because of the font change, so sorry about that. How do you hire someone into your organization that has those skills through your interview process rather than questioning them on things that are job specific or experience specific? So the future of work is going to require all of us to think differently about a lot of things. And another one that I think a lot of people are really kind of sleeping on in their talent strategies and their recruiting strategies are the fact that the workforce is actually aging. We've certainly seen statistics that I think by 2019, next year, that the majority of the workforce will be millennials. So that gets a lot of attention because for whatever reason over the last few years, we've just focused all of our learning and activities and efforts on dealing with millennials. But as I said earlier, they're in their mid-20s, late 30s now. They're starting to have kids and mortgages and paying off student loans. So they're starting to actually behave a lot more like the Gen X and the baby boomers because they've acquired a lot of responsibility. So millennials are one thing, but what we've forgotten is that the workforce itself over the next few years is now going to be consistently getting older. So if you look even out into this chart projects to 2055, workers age 65 and up, that trend line, that third line, dark blue line there, is just continuing to grow. Now, if you know anybody that's 65 or up, or maybe you're getting close to that, the old thinking was, the quote best practice was that 65, everybody retired and lived on Social Security, they played golf, they went fishing, they knitted, whatever they wanted to do, and that was kind of the goal for everybody to say, I want to retire and do nothing. Well, I think what we've learned and what we see is more and more people can't retire because it's just not financially feasible. Social Security is not enough to support people very often in today's world. Their investments are volatile at best, and in some cases they've tanked, because of some changes in the stock market. But also, more and more people have realized we're going to be living longer. The average age now, I think, is 72 or 77. And it's very hard to fish and play golf if you love that, even if you love that for 20 years. So more and more, the older generation is saying, not only do I want to keep working because it keeps me active and engaged, but I enjoy it, and I have skills that I can bring. And I think a lot of employers really need to be thinking about how do we rethink work to not think about careers as plateauing in your 30s and 40s and then not really investing in our older workers and thinking about how they're going to be moving out and succession planning and all that, but how do we rethink maybe even going out and recruiting older workers to some of our positions, or how can we have job sharing so that maybe a couple of older workers can share a job, or how do we think about, back to that skills acquisition, maybe they were a senior vice president in sales for, until they were 65 and they want to retire and just do something different, and they could be, wild and crazy example, our receptionist because they have good people skills. I don't know. It's sometimes about a lot of the older workers and even people of all ages are saying, I want to do just what I enjoy doing, or do the work that I enjoy doing, or use just these few skill sets that I have. So how can we think about this rise of the silver workforce? Because that's a big talent pool for a lot of organizations that are maybe struggling to find talent because they're going about things in the traditional way. They're trying to recruit and attract the same people to their organizations as everyone else. Meanwhile, there are people out there that are older and have a lot of experience that could benefit their workplace and their workforce in a lot of ways. Another thing to think about, and I've kind of alluded to it through some of the examples that I've given, more and more people are wanting to work remotely or have flexibility in their work. And this is a recent chart from Indeed through their data where they've seen that flexible work arrangements are some of the most popular search terms that are put on the Indeed website. So terms like remote, telecommute, work from home are more and more popular searches when people are looking for jobs. Now, that can be for a lot of reasons. Again, it could be that less and less people want to do the old traditional kind of relocate with your family every 3 years in order to grow your career. It can also be, again, that a lot of people are kind of going into that gig economy, the freelance work, the contract work. So I have skills to offer, but I'm going to do that from my home office. And a lot of it also is more and more people have to have 2 and 3 incomes to support their family in our world. So they might have a full-time job, but they want to also have a side gig where they're maybe a software developer in their workplace, but they can work 2 or 3 hours at night at home and make some additional money to take, care of their family. So those are skill sets and time, though, that our organizations can access if we think about work differently. So again, instead of thinking about a body and a seat from 8 to 5 or whatever your work hours are, or even a remote worker who's employed just with us, maybe we employ multiple people on a contract, freelance, or remote basis who can bring us the skills that we need, and that's how we need to think differently about filling opportunities in the future. Another best practice, and again, it's kind of in the last 5 years, was really kind of hit that best practice where recruitment marketing was what we were told to do as companies. We need to think about employer branding and how do we get the messages out there about our opportunities. And recruitment marketing involves a lot of things, including how do we post our jobs, how do we write our job descriptions, but also doing things like having a company blog or having information that we're sharing on social media, content marketing in order to attract people to our brand and to get familiar with us so that then they might also be interested in our jobs. I think a next practice, though, is really thinking about relationship marketing. So not just how can we get brand awareness, but how can we actually build relationships with people who either may be employees for our organization or who may help us connect with people who could eventually help us fill the jobs that we need. So relationship marketing it takes more time, but how can we personally communicate human to human with people? And that might be through social media or some of the digital channels out there, but really kind of building those personal connections. Sometimes it means going back a little old school and doing event-based recruitment, maybe having not a job fair, but something similar to that that's maybe more fun or gets people's attention. That's, a lot of things, like a lot of things, even with fashion, things keep coming back where for so long that we were having, virtual job fairs and doing everything online. And now some people are craving that human interaction. So maybe doing an event, in-person recruiting event is a way that you can differentiate yourself. And certainly there's opportunities for challenges and competitions, whether that's sponsoring high school engineering competitions or robot, competitions or, having challenges online where people, can engage and fill out, scavenger hunts, et cetera, to just kind of bring them into your orbit and help them become familiar with you so that then maybe they investigate the jobs that are available at your company, or maybe they refer you to people that are in their network that are looking for jobs. So relationship marketing, I think, is a new spin on kind of how do we get our jobs and our company and our brand in front of people. So speaking about branding, employer branding, again, over the last few years, definitely something that companies need to be thinking out regardless of size. How do people perceive your organization as a place to work so that then, again, they're either interested in your jobs or potentially willing to refer your jobs? So employer branding usually involves some way of telling your company's story, having talking points about what we stand for as an organization and what the experience is like to work here, and how can we connect our employer brand to the overall brand. That's the magic that a lot of companies still miss today is we have an employer brand, but we need to make sure that that is in sync with our overall brand. So with employer branding, absolutely, again, still a lot of companies get this wrong. You have to have an engaging website. That often means, regardless of company size, again, small or large, it just might mean production value might be different, but often people don't care about those things. Having things like videos of your employees talking about what it's like to work there, sharing how they connect to the company and what the mission is, having blog posts where people talk about what it's like to work at your company, social media posts, or allowing your employees to share and encouraging them to share about their experience online. Doing anything and everything you can to have people, especially your employees, your current employees, talking about your company and the experience of working there. But then making sure that when people do hear about your company or how cool it is, probably one of the first things they're going to do is Google your website and look at the careers page. Is that actually engaging and does it get that messaging across? So when we think about employer branding, again, that's a lot of messaging about our company, but what about employee branding? As I said, how can we get our employees to tell their story? People trust other people more than they trust your company website or your marketing message. They want to hear about the experiences of what it's like to work in your organization, and they want to see how people connect meaning to the work that they do for your company. The reality is, and this is an Edelman Trust Barometer that they do this study on a periodic basis, but employees are 3 times more credible than your CEO when talking about work conditions. When you think about your own experience, just your Google search activity. If you do a Google search today, most of us do a Google search. The first 2 or 3 are sponsored links. I don't know about you, but most of the time I go right past those and I look to the organic link. I want to see what are other people clicking on, not who's paying to get my attention, but I want to know kind of the crowdsourced, the people version. Same thing with jobs. if the CEO is standing up talking about what a great place it is to work, well, most of us assume that's his or her job to say that, probably. It's also, they're in a pretty good position in the company to feel good about it because they have a lot of control and autonomy over that message. But if I'm applying for a job as an accounts payable clerk, I'd much rather hear about what another accounts payable clerk has to say about what it's like to do that job at this company. So they trust your actual employee voices more than they trust your marketing message, which you still need to have. It's great to have your CEO on your website talking about your company and the mission, et cetera, but to really connect with the job seeker today and to get them to think about your place as a place to work and to differentiate you from other companies and other similar jobs out there, getting your employees involved and helping them to brand your experience can really be helpful. Here's another example. 66% of candidates believe interactions with employees are the best way to get insight into a company. So it's overwhelming majority of people say, I want to hear it just like it is from the horse's mouth. And again, in the back of our minds, we know that you probably wouldn't put your worst employee on there who's talking about how terrible it is to work there. You're not going to be stupid enough to post that video on your website. But on the other hand, you did have somebody who was willing to say something positive. So it comes back to people are looking for those types of messages. And then how can you engage your people? Again, if you have an organization that has 10 employees, 100 employees, 10,000 employees, all of those employees are your best opportunity to get the message out there. You can pay money and hire a marketing team or a marketing agency or have employees whose specific job it is to share the messages about your company, but you have 10 to 10,000 opportunities for people to be out there sharing your messages every day. And here's an example of doing that really well. I think Earl's Restaurant, which is headquartered in Canada, they actually, through some employee opinion surveys, came up with some things that were issues for their current employees about growth opportunities internally. They didn't feel like they were able to hear enough about those. Another thing that had come up in an opinion survey was that they didn't feel like recognition was done as well as it could be, and that they also weren't aware of other opportunities that was a multi or store organization, that people weren't able to find out about opportunities in other areas. So one thing they've done is they created a campaign where they encourage their employees to share on social media, Facebook, Twitter, LinkedIn, Instagram, any of their experiences working at Earl's. And to use hashtags like hashtag #MyEarls, hashtags #PeopleGrowHere, hashtag Earl's Kudos. So for example, if there's another employee that you want to recognize for something, tweet about it and hashtag it Earl's Kudos. If you're getting to go to a conference to learn or you're attending an in-house seminar, hashtag your experience, People Grow Here. And then if you just want to share something about your job or what you like about working for our company, hashtag that #MyEarls. So that way people can, within the company, both be following those hashtags, but they also went a step further and they aggregate the stories that are posted on their careers page of those hashtags. So if you go to the MyEarls career page, you'll see actual posts and tweets and Instagram posts, etc., from their employees using this hashtag. So that goes a long way to creating great content, and that goes a long way to having authentic voices that people trust sharing about the company online. So a great way to engage the people and take feedback. And then certainly we've all done the traditional best practice of posting job ads, and those can be important. But often we fail because we copy and paste the job description, we share skills and experience requirements, and it's more about what the company needs. Maybe the next practice is to think more like you're a copywriter. You're writing sales copy. This is like a brochure where we're trying to sell our products, and so it needs to talk in a different language to people. When you think about sales copy, it's written to attract the ideal customer or candidate. It taps into emotions. So great sales copy makes you think, I must have this. I need it because I'm going to be prettier or smarter or whatever. So how can we write our job postings in a similar way? What's the emotion that people feel when working in this job, or how can we touch their hearts and minds? Skills and experience needed, but showing people how we help you get that. So you'll have the opportunity to learn how to do X, Y, and Z by doing A, B, and C at our company. And oh, by the way, here's a video of one of our employees talking about he or she gets to do that. So sales copy, much more impactful than traditional job postings. So here's just some tips to think about when you're writing good sales copy. You know, think like you're the Mad Men, Don Draper type people with all the good behaviors and not the bad ones. But a few sentences about what your company's purpose is and vision to the world. So at the end of the day, how does your company, your product change the world? Even if you're making widgets, you've got to find a way to connect to a higher purpose, both for your existing employees, but for people considering that they want to work there. And that's not just a millennial young generation thing. Why is this role important to the company? So again, the work that I do needs to matter. So even if I'm the accounts payable clerk, how do I help change the world by doing that job? Certainly you want to list some of the responsibilities of the job so that people can say, I either see myself doing that or I don't. But then also talk about why the candidate would want to work there and what the opportunities for growth are. You know, does that mean you're going to be able to work on challenging assignments? You're going to have interaction with an interesting group of people. You know, it's not all about promotions and pay increases. People think about career growth and opportunity in terms of, are they adding skill sets and getting opportunities? And so how do your job advertisements kind of lay that out for people? And then listing required versus preferred qualifications. We've all heard this for years, but yet we still list things like the 4-year degree required for jobs that we have people working in that don't have 4-year degrees. So how can you really identify the actual real requirements for the job so that you can get more people to select in, opt in to consider for your opportunities? Now I want to quickly just kind of run through some pretty cool and interesting examples here. Here's one, and this ad is from a few years ago, but it got a lot of attention where a small company was looking for software developers in San Diego. And again, that's a pretty competitive market and pretty competitive job. So they took an approach where they used a lot of 4-letter words or better in their job advertisements. And this got picked up by Reddit and shared all over, and I'm sure they got a ton of people applying for the job. But even more important, I'm sure they got a lot of people that said, I would never want to work in a company like that, and that was part of their strategy. So you can see here I've grayed out the actual, quote, offensive words, but they were searching for 2, whatever you want to put there, great developers. And if you were one of those developers and you want to make a bunch of money working from somewhere awesome, then keep reading. And then I love when you get down to the bottom on the job, it says, you can do these things. If you think you can handle that, grayed out word, then it would be awesome if you also know SQL. And then they say, if you're excited to work here, then you might have an opportunity to use those things. They went further then, and they continued to explain what the hiring process was. Again, they're trying to really have people both opt in and opt out here. You can email us. Again, they threw in a 4-letter word requested in this job ad. And then I love number 4, tell everybody how great your life is, and just because you're super whatever, you're hired. So then they finally ended it with this PPS. We do not encourage or display profanity levels above the social norm in the workplace. As such, profanity will not be accepted in lieu of skill. So they totally made fun of themselves. They totally put their culture out there on display. And again, some people will say, this is awesome, and I, effing want to work there. Other people will be like, that is terrible. I can't believe that there's a place like that exists. And the reality is, those people would never fit in their culture. And so this is a great way to not only get noticed, it's a next practice, but also to really filter out who's potentially a culture fit and who's not. Here's another one, and this is actually from a couple of years ago, but I just keep it because I love it so much. A couple of years ago, this was 2016, Kanye West, if you follow Kanye at all, was on another one of his Twitter rants where he said, I write this to you, my brothers, while still $53 million in debt. Please pray we overcome. This is my true heart. And the Philadelphia police, of all people, again, you wouldn't think about police, but there's a lot of police departments that do a great job on social media, photoshopped Kanye in a police uniform and says, we are hiring Kanye. You can start at a salary of $47,900 and you can be debt-free by the year 3122. That got noticed, that got shared. Maybe they got a police officer out of it, I don't know. But how can you maybe kind of latch on to some things that are in the news? And again, there's tons of Twitter accounts. Wendy's is another Twitter account that does a great job of being funny and fun and getting a lot of attention in general. So for your jobs, how can you think about doing these things? External hires, that used to be the way we used to think about job openings in the past. We had to go out and find somebody for the position. We always need to think about new blood. What I want you to think about are internal hires. There are people in your organization that if you invested some time and resources in them to train them to take on some new skills, would probably ultimately be a better fit for your jobs because they're already a culture fit if they're there and you're investing in them. You're providing them career growth, which is usually one of the #1 reasons why people leave a company if they don't see the opportunity for there. And so changing our focus to talent scouting, often within our own organizations rather than just filling job postings and positions, is a new way to think about the future. And then very quickly, employee referral bonuses. We've all probably got some sort of bonus and employee referral program. We give away money, we have prize drawings, and then when the candidate starts, we have to wait an X number of days to get the reward. Referrals are certainly a great way to drive traffic, and this survey data from Jobvite shows, it's exponentially the best source of quality hires. And so absolutely, how can you invest in your employee referral programs? By doing that, the next practice is really educating your employees on exactly how they can help bring people to your organization. The reality is people don't refer people to your organization because they get $50 or $500. They refer people because they want to help their friends. If they like working where they are, then they want to bring people into the same experience. So how can you educate them on your process? The reality is money, as I said, is not necessarily a motivator, and Google actually proved it a few years ago. Having difficulty rehiring, they raised their employee referral bonus program, and it didn't work. What does work is, this is an example again from another L'Oreal, where they have their recruiters go and actually take selfies with the people that they hire. And they share that on social media of how excited they are that a successful hire has joined the company that day. So that gets the word out about L'Oreal and recruiting. It involves people, it engages people, and it helps them to see how they can make a difference. We need to engage candidates. That's something that is often a thing that companies don't understand. Candidate engagement, candidate experience, making sure that we are creating a good experience today, because the candidates today in today's market have choice. There have been times in the past where employers were in the driver's seat and you're like, you're lucky that we even called you for this interview and if we hire you, but no more. And again, unemployment is low, skills are not as available as we'd like. So you've got to think about how you can create a great candidate experience. And that helps you not only with your recruiting process, but also helps your company's bottom line, because you're much more likely to create customers with a great candidate experience than you are if you treat them poorly. So again, I've left you with some decisions. All of the things I've mentioned are good practices. Some of them are better than others, but really it comes up to you. Do you choose the blue pill and remain with best practices and follow the crowd? Continue to get a little bit better with your practices every year and every day? Or do you think about taking that red pill and entering into the unknown and seeing how far you can go? I don't know about you, but I think the red pill sounds pretty cool. So I think we have a few minutes available for questions. Hopefully you have some after kind of sharing all that with you, and I'd be happy to do so.
Great. Thank you for that great presentation. We do actually have a couple of questions from the audience right now. The first question we have is, did the job posting description include researching social media pages to make sure potential employees are conducive for that work environment? If so, please give a few reasons.
So if I understand the question correctly, it's, do we go out and look at their social media pages to see if they're a fit? Is that how you understand the question, Angela?
Exactly. Yep. That's how I understood it as well.
Personally, I wouldn't necessarily recommend that as part of my strategy. I think, like most things, anything that you do in your hiring process needs to be applied consistently. So if you're going to look at all of the social media posts for someone, you're going to have to do it for everyone. So I'm much more of the mindset of, I want to attract people into my orbit, and then I want to use my assessment process, my interview process, the conversations that we have to understand whether or not we're both a match for each other. Because if I go out and I start looking at their social media posts online, it's too much open for interpretation. Again, a lot of times people post with sarcasm or humor that they either know or think is going to be understood by certain people, that when seen by other people is interpreted differently. And I think it's a slippery slope that I personally don't want to get involved with. making judgments about people from their social media posts. And again, the bigger one for me is if I do that for one, I'm going to have to do it for everybody, because if someone does sue me, because and I hate to think like the get sued thing, but if someone sues me because they felt like I discriminated against them because of looking at their social media posts, then I'm going to have to show data that I use that process for everybody consistently, or otherwise I'm in trouble if I just did it once.
Great, thank you. And we have another question on the line. Any suggested interview questions employers can use to determine critical traits versus experience questions?
Yeah, I think in terms of, like critical thinking, et cetera, giving them challenges to solve, or even some of the traditional behavioral interviewing questions that we think about. I just think so many people, behavioral interview questions are not used right in most cases. You ask somebody to tell me about a time question, and you think you're actually listening to understand the actual situation they explain, where the real way to look at behavioral interviewing questions is to think about what was their thought process. How did they approach the problem? If you say, tell me about a time when you failed and how did you handle that? I could care less what the example is that they give me. What I want to know, am I listening for things like, did they accept responsibility for their decision? Did they involve other people in trying to understand the next steps? Did they go back and, repair any harm? I'm looking at the actions and the thought process, and I think that's how you get at critical thinking. Can you ask questions where someone maybe explains something, but yet you get clues all along the way as to how they think and behave and respond, much more than, at the end of the day, I saved the company $1 million. Well, great, you saved the company $1 million. But if you did that through, running over people and causing harm throughout the organization and not building, cooperation, et cetera, then you're, I don't know, depending on your culture, but in my culture, you're not going to be a fit. So I want to listen to people's answers to the questions that I ask. First, ask great questions. And again, there's lots of great behavioral interviewing questions, but really paying attention to the candidate's thought process, their actions, and how they respond to certain situations. And you could do that as well with presenting them with a hypothetical challenge and seeing how, people, Google's famous for that, are manhole covers round, or why are they round? That's a terrible question. They've even admitted that. But a better question where you can get someone to actually work through maybe an actual business problem or a theoretical business problem and how they would approach it, you can listen to their thought process that way.
Great, and I think we have time for one more question, and this one is around diversity hiring and veterans specifically. And the question is, how do you recruit for diversity and veterans? And a follow-up tangential question is, the best tool or resource to finding these qualified applicants of diverse backgrounds?
Mm-hmm. Well, in the first part, in terms of like diversity candidates and veterans, you've really, there's a couple of scenarios. One is you are doing a great job at that and you want to continue to highlight that so that you can make sure you continue to maintain your diversity. Well, that's something, whether it's, again, that employer branding or you're having employees share their story, people will want to see other people like them showing that they work there. So your website absolutely should not be stock photos of happy, diverse people, because everybody knows a stock photo when they see it and they know those aren't your employees. So taking pictures of your employees in the actual work environment and highlighting, through being able to show real life situations, the diversity, having candidates of all types, backgrounds, thought processes, approaches, gender, racial, et cetera, sharing their experience. Then I'm able to connect with people of all types who can say that person is similar to me and I can see myself working there. So highlighting the diversity you have. On the other hand, if you don't have the diversity that you would like to have and you're working in that direction, it's not always a great practice to trot out like your one diverse hire and say, hey, go out to our job fairs and interview people, because people are going to look at your website, they're going to see that all your executives all look the same, et cetera. So talking about your approach and why that's important, and having the people of all mixes that are in your organization talk about why we need more diversity, that honesty, I think, is again a great way to kind of attract. In terms of resources, there are probably many out there in terms of tools, but certainly connecting with organizations who then believe in your mission and what you're trying to accomplish and will partner with you, whether that's, specific diverse professional organizations, et cetera. I think, certainly for veterans, there are lots of organizations out there, but a good example would be like Lockheed Martin. Has some really critical hiring needs for skilled workforce over the next few years. So they are very much targeting veterans and people transitioning out of the military. And they've created a whole talent community for veterans that is just information that they give away for free. So people can connect to that community, join the community, and they get articles. So Lockheed curates articles from career coaches, from veterans in their organization, from people who are in the, anybody and everybody. They don't have to be with Lockheed. And they've created kind of this one-stop shop for great information about transitioning from a career in the military to a civilian career. So that brings people into Lockheed's orbit, and they get the association with we're providing and adding value to veterans, which therefore makes them one of the most attractive employers for veterans as well, because that kind of name association with being very veteran focused helps them to have that pool right there in their front yard, so to say, of people that then they can attract into their organization. And their talent community, I believe, is called Military Connect, so you could Google that if you wanted to learn more.
Thank you so much. I think that's all the time we have in terms of questions. So I'll turn it back over to the HR Daily folks. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Angela, and thank you so much, Jennifer, for presenting today and being here with us. I'd like to also thank today's webinar sponsor, Jobvite, for making this event possible today. Before you exit, I do want to provide today's credit codes. There's a slide currently available and up on your screen with the credit information. The HRCI number for today's webcast is 356037. This webcast is also approved for SHRM credit. The SHRM credit code is 18-Q3VIH. You will also receive an email from the HR Daily Advisor approximately 24 hours after today's event with a copy of the credit information along with a link to today's recording and any program materials. Please also note that at the end of this webcast, you will see an exit survey. To make each webcast valuable to you, we would appreciate your input. HR Daily Advisor and Jobvite would like to thank everyone again for joining us today. This concludes our program. Thank you.